All right. So it looks like the number of folks coming in the room is kind of evened out and plateaued. So I'll go ahead and at least get started. So welcome to Social Justice Leadership for Beginners. So we can get started with some introductions of who I am. So my name is Lawryn Fraley, and I use the pronouns she, her, hers. This is not a picture of myself. It came with the template. But I am blonde, so that is that, but you can see me. So a little bit about myself is I am a second year master's student here at BGSU. My program is called College Student Personnel. My role on campus is I'm a graduate coordinator for the orientation programs here. I've had some practicum experiences in accessibility services, and I'm also a LEAD 1000 instructor. So I've recognized a couple of your names from my course, so I'm really excited to see you all. I have a bachelor's in journalism from the University of Iowa. I'm from Iowa, I love it. And then the most important identities to me are Libra, Woo, and Enneagram 2 and ENFJ. Just some fun. But the reason why I share a little bit about myself is because I want to share like what gives me the right to present about social justice leadership. And it's a tough question, but I think I have just enough experience to share about my own journey and help you find the beginning of your journey. Now, I will reiterate over and over again, there is no woke competition. There is no wokeness winner. There is no such thing as anyone ever being able to finish this type of journey towards being a social just and the most social just leader. But I have been beginning on my journey the last few years, especially during my undergrad and my grad career. So I like to help people find that. I also think that it's important for people who look like me, as I am a like white, cisgender, heterosexual woman. I am able-bodied, and I and like middle class. All of these privileged identities can help educate other people about identity work and oppression and power. And I think it's sometimes almost even more important that people like me have these conversations, no matter how uncomfortable and difficult they may be, because that lightens the burden of education off of the shoulders of others. But don't worry, there will always be room for growth for everyone, including myself. So that's a little bit about myself. If anyone ends up having any questions, I think Jacob, the moderator, allowed y'all to have speaking privileges, I think, in this version of Zoom, so you can go ahead and unmute yourself as needed. There are a couple discussion questions, but if you have any questions about that, you can go ahead and ask them whenever sees fit. All right, so what are we going to be talking today? So I want to set the expectation correctly. What you will learn today is why social justice is so important and why it is important to leadership. I'm going to walk you through 4 steps for becoming a more socially just and self-aware leader. And then we'll wrap up with some tips for continuing this conversation in your own life and continuing the social justice journey. Now, since this is for beginners, this is going to have a lot to do with you and your own exploration of your identities and your place as a leader. So unfortunately, this isn't the advanced version. So I won't have the time to teach you how to break up with your boyfriend who maybe says bad words, or your grandma who says some things at the dinner table. I can't instruct you or help you win those Facebook arguments about current events. So those are things that will come with time and confidence and a deeper understanding of yourself and your beliefs. But again, if you chose to attend this session, I'm operating under this assumption that you all have like some sort of buy-in or level of care when it comes to believing social justice is important. Maybe some of you are like, yes, I know it's important, but I don't fully understand how to explain that to other people. And that's a perfect reason why you can be here today. So that's the expectations. As my expectation, if my expectations for you all are just ask questions if they come up, take everything with a grain of salt, because I am teaching this and instructing this session from my own perspectives and paradigms. And I'm also learning as well. So sometimes, I might mess up, and that's okay. If you just let me know, that is perfectly fine. All right. Perfect. So social justice, let's just start with the root. We're going to review. If anyone has the ability to unmute and is feeling brave enough on this Saturday afternoon to share what their perspectives of social justice are, I would greatly appreciate that. Okay, so it looks like you can utilize the chat function, so that would be a perfect middle ground. So if y'all could write in the chat a couple words that you think of when you hear social justice, if you have an informal or beginning definition, you can share that. Here. I don't know. Great. Okay. Okay, yeah, great. So now we have thanks, Will, for bringing up the mute unmute, but I'm glad that you all could use the chat function. That's really low risk, and so that'll be safer for today's purposes. So it looks like Annabella says, I have some background noise, so she's just going to type. Social justice to this person is allowing everyone to have fair and equal chance at life and opportunities without anyone telling them they can't do something. Hey, Sid. Sydney says, I think it's about standing up for something that you morally believe is right. Okay. These are all great. Any other? When you think of social justice, are there any current events that come to mind? Any issues, hot topic buttons, anything like that comes to mind? The chat box is going to be your friend, so just you can spam it. I won't mind at all. Great. Yeah, LGBTQ plus rights, right? Human rights, people, all of that. So here's a definition. Social justice is a concept of fair and just relations between the individual and society as measured by the distribution of wealth, opportunities for personal activity, and social privileges. So it looks like someone else also put something in the chat. I think it's how biases affect how housing and employment, etc. Basically how the unspoken economic, social, and political rights are given to people. Yeah, that's a really great, I like how you brought in a lot of the systems that we'll probably mention today as well, like housing and employment. Yeah, that's great, Will. Some buzzwords in this definition that I really want to highlight, and we can talk about this in the next slide as well, is the difference between fair and just. So there is a difference between what is fair and what is just. Relations between individuals and societies. And you could kind of replace societies with the systems or institutions in which we operate in. So whether that's a school system or a government system or the social security system or BGSU as an institution, it's the relationship between an individual and their experiences and that institution as well. And then this definition also includes things like distribution of wealth, which doesn't necessarily mean money, but could include money. Opportunities for personal activity, so access to education and healthcare and all of those other things that are kind of wrapped up along with social privileges as well. So this is a very big, broad definition that includes lots of things in very kind of heady words and terminology. So we can break it down a little bit. So, oh, there is definitely a typo in this slide. I apologize. So equal, equity, and justice in human rights, access, participation, right? But equal, equity, and justice, apparently, are three different levels. And I think all three of them have a place within social justice, but they're very distinct. Now we can try out the chat one more time, see how that goes. But does anyone kind of know maybe the difference between those three, equal, equity, and justice? I know there's some graphics or some really good metaphors that people use all the time. Right? So equal is exactly as it is. Everything is the same, no matter what the circumstance, no matter what the person or any of the context. So it's the same. So like, you know, I have 3 children and I give them all 3 1 by 1 inch brownies, right? Same weight, same flavor, same kind. Equity is when you kind of look at the needs and yeah, the in moment needs of the individual or the systems, right? So maybe one of my children is allergic to nuts, so I would get them the nut-free brownie, and the other 2 children will have the same, but more tailored to their needs. And justice goes just a step further in. Oh, it looks like Layla said shared something. Equal is when someone is giving something to help them access something. Equity is when barriers are removed entirely, but I'm not sure how properly to properly describe justice. Yes. So kind of along those lines. Sorry for the somethings. That's okay. That's great. I am going to use the word something and thing and all those things a bunch today. So similar to your definition, equal is when people are given the same things. Equity is when people are given the tools that they need to make things equal. And then justice is when you remove those barriers. So you were really close. So if we go back to the brownie and the nut allegory thing, metaphor, equal is if I give all 3 of my kids brownies, despite maybe there being some nuts on top of all of them, and one of my child is allergic to nuts. And maybe the middle child, in the terms of equity, would get the nut-free brownie. And then when it comes down to justice, I would give my child maybe perhaps a antidote to peanut allergies. So that's correcting the system so that they won't need any of the tools or removing those barriers is the justice piece. But equity is about giving tools to everyone so that they can overcome obstacles. And equal is just like everyone gets the same thing. Now, all of these come down to human rights, access, participation, all of those things that you were already mentioning in your own personal definitions of social justice. So those are all really important as well. And they all have their own 3 dimensions of equal, equity, and justice, right? So we're talking about social justice, but we haven't quite talked about leadership yet. So why should leaders care about social justice is the next question that I have, and we can see if folks want to add in the chat. So go ahead and answer this in the chat if you'd like. So again, the question is, why should leaders care about social justice? So there's a lot of really obvious, most important answers to this question. They're going to be along the lines of having a functional team where team members feel safe, where they feel validated, where they can work together, where everyone's opinions and experiences and cultural backgrounds are honored and celebrated, not just tolerated. All those things. But in addition to that, if you're looking at leadership as a more inspiring, overarching role, and there are a lot of benefits to social justice for the greater good of your team and the community at large. So in addition to safety and security, social justice promotes diversity and belonging. And so those are words that we hear all the time. Diversity and belonging, diversity, inclusion, and belonging are like titles for things, for events. But we rarely explicitly talk about the benefits of what diversity and belonging offer. So let's see. Looks like Will says, if leaders, and importantly the members as well, care about social justice, interrelations in the group can be strengthened and trust boosted. Also, if they want to keep their salaries. That's a good point. You want everyone to be really present and active in their role. And you said salaries, but sometimes leadership can be in and out of the job realm as well. Looks like Sid said, I think it is important to care about social justice because it's going to help create goals that do more than just what you need to accomplish. If you're thinking about social justice, then you might be able to make the goals you set long lasting. Yeah, so you're really getting onto something. There are all of these benefits on the screen to a socially just leadership style and community. So diversity, so having lots of different types of people with different types of identities and cultural backgrounds and experiences, that's going to bring a lot of innovation and creativity and different methods of problem solving, which is going to lead your team to be more productive. They're going to be more engaged, and ultimately, kind of like Will was saying, there's going to be even economic or resource growth in your team. So that might seem like a more impersonal way of looking at the benefits of diversity and belonging. But if you're looking at diversity and belonging becoming a trend in corporations, and if you're looking at Pepsi ads being more socially just, it's because there is money behind it as well. And then when you have a team that feels like they belong, you're having a team that's more emotionally and physically well off, having that well-being. You're creating friendships and community. That community builds happiness with empathy in it. And all of those are really important for just having a really good foundation that brings that diversity in and keeps it there. That's another thing. It's really good to attract on your face value a good diverse team with all these different strengths that can work together. But it's really hard to convince them to stay, right? If you don't feel honored or celebrated, why would you stay there? So we've connected, we've established what social justice is. We've kind of talked about why it's important in leadership. And then we've kind of talked about why social justice is important and why leaders should care about social justice at all. So here's a little bit of that. All right. So now you're like, okay, yes. I know all of this. That's why you attended. I would like to be a socially just leader, or at least know how to start. Because in the bio of this description, I talked a little bit about okay, so, you've done the obvious things. You've put your pronouns in your Instagram caption or your Instagram bio, or, you've shared things on social media about Black Lives Matters, or, kind of the surface level things to do to make sure you label yourself as socially just, but you're really trying to, you know that there's a piece missing. And that piece becomes more apparent that it's missing when you try to interact with others, whether it's family, friends, or people that you are leading, and trying to convey that importance or convey the messages behind social justice. So you can kind of feel that piece missing. And I was there for a really long time. And sometimes I still do feel like that. When I go home for a holiday and I have some family member asking me questions out of genuine curiosity, and I get stumbled and heated, and I'm like, well, it is important. It's human rights. But that's as far as I can get. And it gets really hard for me to explain why things should be the way that I truly believe that they are. I just don't have that background context. So that was the problem that I've had before that I was trying to alleviate with this. So there's 4 steps that we're going to go through. We're going to go through what they are, how to do them in your day-to-day life. And then at the end, we're going to wrap up with some things that you can continue to do to incorporate so that you're constantly going down this path, right? So step number 1, identify and explore your own values. So for those of you who are enrolled in our Lead 1000 course, this is probably going to be something that you hear us talk about week in and week out. Knowing your values establishes self-awareness. Being self-aware and understanding what is truly what you truly value, allows you to act and make decisions in accordance to your values, and creates that congruence. So if whether or not you are aware of your values, sometimes in life you choose or you're forced to make decisions that kind of go against your values, and that feels icky. That gives you that feeling in your gut. Well, people can kind of sense that feeling. Have you ever like interacted with someone that kind of gives you that ick? You don't know why, but they kind of like bug you a little bit morally or ethically. They seem like slimy. Well, people can really sense when someone is, call a spade, fake. So if you can tell when someone's fake, you're not going to trust them. There's something icky about them. And it's probably because you've been noticing that they act outside of their values. And the most important reason behind this congruence and self-awareness is that it results in trustworthiness. So if you're a leader, especially if you're one that is trying to be more socially just, then you're going to need that trustworthiness piece on your side, not only for other people to feel comfortable with you, making them uncomfortable sometimes. And we'll talk a little bit later about how being socially just means you have to make yourself and others feel uncomfortable. But it also helps you trust yourself and what you're doing and why it's important. And it's hard work. This isn't going to be easy sometimes. So you have to trust the process. So that trustworthy piece is really important. So that congruence is key. So that's step one. Now, some ways that you can do this could be as simple as journaling, or creating a mood board. But sometimes that can have be really hard to motivate yourself to do those things independently while you could be doing other fun things, right? So sometimes I talk to the people who raised you. If you have a good relationship with your parents or your family, ask them, like, when you raised me, what were the values that you kept in mind? Ask your grandparents or your friends, like, what do you like me as a friend? What makes me a really good friend? And have other people tell you what your values are. Obviously take that with a grain of salt and challenge them. If your friend says, I really like how you value the White Sox. Is that really what we're getting at here? But if I ask my roommate, Chad, hey, like, what makes me a good roommate? He'll say, like, you prioritize loyalty. That is a value in you that I see every day that I think makes me really trust you and have a good, strong relationship. So in addition to those like value workshops or any of those things you can find in the internet or those journaling prompts, you can also have those conversations with those friends and those families as well. So that's step one. You have to know who you are as a person, as in a character, so that you can establish trustworthiness with yourself and with your followers as well. All right. And the second step is that you have to identify and explore your own social identities. So this can be tough because social identities are your race, things like your ethnicity, gender, sexuality, ability, marital status, education, class, whether or not what your first language is, your military affiliation. There's lots of those. Your religion is one. There's a lot of those lists online as well that also have those like prompts. But it's really important that you know who you are in this sense as well, because social identities, if you look at it, social is the key, the first word. And that is because that these identities are how other people see you and perceive you in their world, in their context. So first, we identified your values. How do you see yourself? This is going to be how do your identities interact in the world? How do other people see you, and how do they create these assumptions about you? So first, identifying what they are, figuring out, going down the list. That's going to be somewhat hard, easy. There's a couple that you might have to do research or some soul searching, or maybe asking your parents. But what's really going to be hard is exploring and researching what identities give you power and privilege. Bless me. Thank you. So power and privilege are really kind of sticky words that can sometimes put a bee in people's bonnet. And that's, that's a natural reaction and a reaction that you can grow past as well if that's something that you experience when you start exploring. So what I mean by power and privilege are kind of unearned benefits, whether those are material or not, or most of them are just social, or experiences that your identities that you were born with were giving to you without you having to ask for them or earn them. Now, that doesn't mean that that means you didn't earn anything or you didn't have to work hard. The best part about social identities is that you have so many of them. They all interact in so many different ways. So not all of your identities are going to give you power and privilege. A few may, and if you're like me, many of them will. And that's okay too. You could even consider yourself lucky as well. But the more of those identities that you have, like, for example, I'm white, and generally being a white person gives you a lot of unrealized explicit and implicit privileges over your peers of color, your Black friends, or your Asian friends. That those comes with a lot of different experiences. I know that if in a few years I want to apply for a home loan, I'm more likely to get a home loan than my Black friend. And that's just because of the color of my skin. Same with job applications. And these are all things that we all know in the back of our mind. Admitting them to yourself can be really difficult, and that's okay. It can be hard at first too. But if you're feeling any parts of guilt associated with that, some things that you can tell yourself to move past that guilt could be: guilt is what immobilizes people, and it's the glue that keeps the systems that we have going now in check. So oppression is glued together by people who are guilty, too guilty to continue. So some people will get halfway through step 2 and they'll kind of stop because it gets too uncomfortable. Take a break, make some tea, whatever you got to do, and then you have to get back on track. And that's just the hard part. But after you've kind of researched and explored the parts of yourself that give you those privileges and those powers that you were unaware of, you can also do some research of like, what of your identities hold you back or create barriers, but most likely you're kind of already aware of those by now. And if you're not, that's okay too. Do we have any questions? If you have any questions at all, you can throw them at the chat, but we're going to move on to step 3. All right. So next, you're going to start researching, and researching seems like such a big word, and it's like really kind of can give you connotations of laborious schoolwork, but we'll talk about what research could really look like in this instance. You're going to start looking at your own implicit biases. So step 3, we've established who you are, we've established who others see you as, and now you're going to start to look at how do you see other people implicitly. And that implicit means internally without any conscious awareness of how you are making any of these judgment or information collection. So implicit biases are natural. Every human has them. I have them. Gandhi has them. Obama has them. Literally everyone you can think of operates off of some sort of set of these implicit biases. And those are a human survival tactic. So your brain tries to pick up on patterns so that it can think faster and be more efficient. It's about survival. It's about, efficiency in this world. So let's see. Sometimes I like to think of smelling cookies being baked. Like, oh, I smell cookies, there must be cookies, without any evidence that there's actually cookies. It could be a candle, it could be someone's perfume, or literally anything else, but you're immediately going to assume that there's cookies in the oven. So kind of those like mental shortcuts. But how they operate in this sense is a lot of those stereotypes. So like if you, let's see, an implicit bias. let's see that you say, you see a blonde woman like myself. An implicit bias might make you believe, without you ever having these actual words come through your brain, that myself or another blonde woman isn't as smart or isn't as good at math or something like that. Those are things that are going to be running through the back of your head, the subconscious, that are going to influence some of the actions and beliefs that you have. So everyone has those. Now, researching them might just require some reflection or some journaling. I know, journaling, but reflection and keeping track of some of the decisions and assumptions you've made about someone. I had a friend who she what assumption did you make about someone and why do you think that might be? I had an example, totally lost it, but keeping track of those and then challenging them. It can be really hard, but you have to be super aware of all of your feelings. So that's a really good side effect of all of this stuff, is you become really good at diagnosing your own feelings. And that's a really good thing for being mentally healthy and well. Also researching that oppression is systemic. That can be a hard thing to learn as well, especially in the fact that you probably operate or exist as a member of multiple different systems. So these systems can be BGSU, a team, any kind of work or volunteer organization, the government, religious organization, any of those things are a system with rules and policies and like paperwork and procedures, and all of those can have people in putting their own implicit biases in these systems without them even knowing over time. So I like to think that systems like BGSU or institutions or organizations have a memory and collect the implicit biases of their past members and leaders. And now it's your role as a leader to be aware that when you're entering into a system of any kind, you have to find and root out all of the old leaders' implicit biases that they accidentally left behind. So a lot of this is just going to be unlearning, and you have to unteach a system all of the implicit biases that it had collected over time. And now a lot of that is going to come out of this research phase. And this research phase is active listening to the experiences of others and practicing empathizing with them. This could be podcasts. This could be books. This could be straight up asking. This could be TED Talks. And those are all listening. And active listening means empathizing, paraphrasing, practicing that. So if you listen to a book, practice telling your friend about the book. Those are all part of this research phase. Okay, we're going to get to step 4. So now you're aware of yourself, you're aware of how others see yourself, and now you're aware of how you see others. It's going to get complicated. But now it's your turn to do some act and challenge. And you're like, come on, you still haven't given me any actual physical, tangible things to do. Well, I have. I'm telling you to read a book, which can be really hard. But once you're past that, I'm asking you to question everything and everyone frequently, including yourself. So question the system. So you get a new job, let's say, and they're like, here's the hiring process. It's your job to hire a new team. Here's how we typically do it. Here are the questions. Here are the rubric for each question and answer. And this is a really common, if you haven't had a job kind of that requires hiring, it's a pretty common part of most jobs. Ask why these questions. Can we change them? Why this process? Why don't we have group interviews as well? Why can't we do this? Now, you don't have to be a brat about it. You can be very kind, like, oh, what about these questions do we like? Are we able to change them? Because you're going to find, especially in the professional world, there's a lot of things that are based off of because we've always done it is the answer. And because we've always done it probably has that memory of all of the other people's implicit biases, their own opinions of how things should be without considering the cultural and social identity impacts of all of those questions of the interviews, or the dress code or any of those. So start questioning things. It could be silently in your head at first. Speaking up can be hard. I realize that. And sometimes questioning authority or new colleagues can be difficult, but keep track of those. So, you get an assignment. So like, why do we do this the way that we do? And then don't ever stop asking for help. And this could be from anyone, but I will caution you, don't use ask for help as a ticket to asking your friend with a different social identity, how do I be better? How do I not be racist? That is you're going to be using your friend's experiences, and that's really, really draining and exhausting. When I say ask for help on how to help yourself. So, what resources do you recommend that I read? Go to someone that you admire in your field or where you're at and say, like, hey, like, I want to get better at supporting women in the workplace. Or I want to really get better at supporting my Black soccer teammates. How do I figure that out? And you maybe go to your coach. Maybe they recommend like student athletes of color podcasts or something along that line. You could start researching on your own and bringing that to the team. Don't go to your Black teammate on the soccer team and say like, hey, you're Black and I'm white. How do I help you? That's very exhausting. Also, it's kind of embarrassing for that person. That feels weird and socially weird. So ask others help on how to help yourself. And then finally, constantly be questioning who's missing in the room. When we talk about inclusion and diversity, we're always talking about who's there. Who do we have on our team? Numbers and physical and visual representations of diversity. We're always counting and looking around. But rarely we always forget that question of who's not here. What absences are we not feeling? And you're gonna find a lot of difficult answers that way. You're gonna look around and you're gonna be on that real positive spin. Well, we have 3 people who are in a sorority, and we have 3 people who are from the West Coast, and blah blah blah. But if you flip that coin and you say who's missing in this room, you could be like, oh well, we don't have any international members of our student organization. Oh, darn, we don't have anyone who X, Y, Z, right? You're going to look for those that area to grow. So that's step 4. You're going to start challenging and questioning and bringing those things up. And the answer of those can always change. It depends on the context, and you can start changing things. But this is just for beginners, right? So I'm not telling you how to ask your grandma to stop being racist at Thanksgiving. This starts with you because you're the leader. After step 4, what's next? And I'm sure some of you have already felt it. You're going to repeat. So you're going to keep going through over and over these phases. And why do you keep repeating the parts about yourself? Well, that's the best part, is that you're going to keep changing and growing as you experience more things. So most of you are in college. I don't know if you're actually put that in the chat. What year are you all in college? If you're around. First year. Okay, so we got a lot of first years. Yeah, okay. So this is your first year, maybe a sophomore or a junior. You're going to change a lot in this first year, and then again in your second year, and you're going to keep changing. And sometimes it's silly because I'll look back, this is my 6th year of college. And I was just talking about the clothes that I used to wear in my first year of college. It's like, wow, I was so different. And I realized my values were really different. What I prioritized was really different. A lot happens when you change, when you move. College is like a really condensed catalyst for all sorts of development and change. And that's really lucky for you, but it's also a lot more work when it comes to evaluating what really is a value to you. You're also going to be exploring your identities, and your identities are going to be challenged for the first time for most of you as well. And you're like, oh, well, if I was born with these, how can I be challenged in them? And that's a good question, but you're going to be faced with more varieties of the identity that you always thought maybe there was one of. And then maybe you try all of these out, and maybe you commit to a different one, or you commit to a more specific version of something that you already knew you were. And all of these are going to come with baggage. And also another reason why you repeat is that culture and current events changes everything every day. So if you're on social media, I love TikTok. I'm on it like 2 hours a day, according to my phone. There are words or phrases or lines from a movie or a song that change meaning overnight and have all of these embedded stories in them. That's all that happens via an app called TikTok. Imagine what words and situations mean every year they change. A year ago, we had never heard of COVID-19. We had never heard of Lion King or murder hornets or any of those things. So every year culture changes, so you have to keep up, and you have to keep up with where you think you are. So you're going to have to keep repeating. Then why are you repeating your research about systems or oppression or any of those things? Well, you have to keep changing your involvement. Maybe you join a new organization, or you move up to another way. Or maybe you move up, and then in this office, there's different systems and procedures and with different memories, right? So you're going to have to keep keeping up with your own life. Unless you remain stagnant in the same situations with the same people, you have other things to worry about. But yeah, so you have to keep catching up. And then also some things to keep in mind. We only have about 8 minutes left. So when I get to you want to keep in mind that this journey never ends. And I know that's so taunting, but that's the beauty of it, is that there's no completion. There's no multiculturally competent certificate. My place in my journey, the road's just going to keep getting longer, and I'm going to keep enjoying the ride, right? So again, I said that there's no such thing as a woke competition. No one's better. And realizing this will help you bring your followers or other peer leaders into this journey with you. So you should never approach a conversation like this being like, oh, you're a bad person because you don't know what pronouns are. Good for you. You just turned someone off to learning about what pronouns were. Or you could approach that situation with, good for me. I have the opportunity to practice sharing with someone the power of pronouns, and my passion behind them is contagious, and they may leave that conversation with a stronger dedication to pronouns. This is just an example. It doesn't have to be pronouns. I also put in here Oppression Olympics, thinking that I would talk about it earlier. Briefly, it's just comparing the plights of different social identities and kind of competing on who has it worse. Avoiding Oppression Olympics is ideal so that you don't trivialize anyone's experiences. So everyone's struggle means just as much as it does to them. And you have no right to tell anyone how they should feel or how things should feel in their lives. So keep that in mind. No one has it worse or better. Or maybe they do, but there is no point in pointing that out or fighting over it while you have work to do, right? So do the work yourself is another thing. We talked about that when I said it's good to ask for help. Again, ask for help on how to help yourself. Don't ask, how do I do this? Ask, how do I find out how to do this? What resources do you recommend? And work on amplifying the voices of others. This can be tough because generally when people are at the stage when they're just now learning the stories and the experiences that go along with researching and immersing yourself in social justice, you get super passionate and you want to share those experiences that you hear with everyone else. You know, you want them to learn. You want them to drink the Kool-Aid just like you did. You get passionate, and that's so good. Hold on to that passion. But sometimes that passion can translate into you being louder than the people actively trying to share their own experiences in that moment. So, you know, this might translate to maybe you're sitting in a class and someone's saying like, oh, like, Hurricane Katrina is the perfect example of environmental racism. Let's say that's the expression, and there's a couple hands go up and you get chosen, and you're talking on and on about this book you read about, you know, an adolescent who was displaced in the Katrina hurricane. But someone in the room was actually displaced about the hurricane, and they're sitting here listening to you describe someone else's experience while you could be amplifying their own experience. So be cognizant of the space that you take up, be cognizant of how loud your voice is, and work on being the person who amplifies and lifts others up. And then finally, always be learning to be comfy with being uncomfy. This is a really great talent that goes far beyond social justice. Being uncomfortable and putting yourself in situations of potential conflict or anything that feels icky, but you know is good for you, it's a form of self-care too. So like, if you're like me, I have a hard time with conflict or sharing with someone that I'm unsatisfied or unhappy. But I know in the long run, if I do this once this time, then it'll get better. You know, like telling my partner like, hey, that hurt my feelings, even though it was small, I don't want it to build. Being able to be comfy with that discomfort, either in social justice or in your personal life, is a good skill that'll last you a lifetime, right? So practicing all of these things and not forgetting that it isn't necessarily about you. And that's the core the core value of being a leader, right? It's about your followers. It's about the community and team and your shared purpose. All right. So it looks like we have about 3 minutes left. Again, start reading, listening, and watching everything. Pick out some goals and take some risks. So for some of you, the risk might be signing up for this conference and coming to this session, being like, I identify as a beginner, but I know that social justice is important, so I'm going to go to this session. This might have been a risk for you. So keep doing that. I'm hoping that you learned one or two things. And also confront your friends or make better ones. Like, I know I told you that I wasn't going to help you break up with your bigot boyfriend at the beginning of this, but seriously, if your friends are saying things that make your stomach turn, say, hey, don't say that. We don't say that here. Or make better friends. Does anyone have any questions the last couple minutes about literally anything? Would anyone like to challenge anything I said? Any mistakes? Questions, feedback? Did you appreciate this? Was this the level that you were expecting? Good. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Yes. Great. I hope that you learned a couple things and you feel reassured. This is everyone. Yeah, thank you, Jacob. All right. Enjoy the rest of the conference. I'll see some of you in class on Monday. Yes. Thanks, Will. You are correct. Have a good Saturday. Enjoy the beautiful weather. If you're in Bowling Green, it's nice here. So.
Thanks, Lawryn.
Thanks.
The next session is going to start, our final session will start at 2 p.m. So take a look at your programs to look at what session you want to do, and have a great rest of your weekend.